I think Professor McGonagall is one of the purest heroes in this book series. Hi everybody and welcome to Secondary Wizards Episode 1. This is the video series where we're looking at the Harry Potter books through the lens of characters who don't always get the spotlight. So today we're talking about Minerva McGonagall and the power of tough love. So why do I pick McGonagall as the first person we're exploring in this series? Because ultimately I think that this is a series about love, and a lot has been said about the way Lily's love manifests, the way Molly Weasley's love manifests, the way Narcissa Malfoy's maternal love manifests. But it's in this widower, Minerva McGonagall, that I think we see another form of maternal love. When we first meet Minerva McGonagall, she is a cat. The sentence in the chapter is, "The cat didn't move, it just gave him a stern look." And what could better define McGonagall's presence throughout the book? She never leaves Hogwarts, truly. She's one of the few characters who stays completely grounded in that world and her role as a protector at Hogwarts. And that stern look is the outward appearance she gives the world. Chapter 1 of this entire series in many ways introduces us to Harry's caretakers, people that will take him under their wing in some way, both bad and for good. So we're introduced to Dumbledore, we're introduced to the Dursleys, we're introduced to Hagrid, we get a mention of Sirius Black, and we're introduced to Professor McGonagall. And I think that often we wouldn't consider Professor McGonagall in that caretaker conversation, in the people who care for Harry over the course of this book series. But I think it's time that we put her into that conversation in this theme of tough love, because ultimately, I think of all of these characters, she proves to be the most adept at caring for his interests first, not her own and not a plan, but his interests. We're introduced to most of Harry's future caretakers, and in the interactions we see the type of caretakers that they're going to be. We have the relatively absent Dursleys who are frightened by the appearance of abnormality, and that will inform all the ways that they mistreat Harry. Similarly, in this chapter, we get a portrait of Hagrid as being extremely doting and emotional. We see how emotional Hagrid is at saying goodbye. We see how connected he is to this child, and that will bear out, of course, throughout the series. We also see echoes of the sort of caretaker that Dumbledore is going to be in this chapter, right? He is duplicitous. He clearly has a plan. He is keeping things from Professor McGonagall. He's keeping information close to the chest as to why they are here, why the Dursleys, secrecy for the sake of a plan. And while he does have Harry's best interests at heart, he knows that that's going to come at an expense, and that's a trade-off that Dumbledore's willing to make time and time again, and it's a trade-off that McGonagall pushes against time and time again. And that's why I want to think of her as the ultimate caretaker in this chapter, who becomes in many ways the ultimate caretaker throughout the books. I think when you're reading this as a kid, it's easy to read McGonagall as that parental figure or that teacher figure or that authority figure who is a stickler for order and for the rules, and you see them as sort of a strict authoritarian because they don't always give you what you want, or because they are not as good at providing an emotionally loving response. And I do think emotional love is important. But what McGonagall offers is equally important, and I think it's important for us to give her credit for that and to see how this chapter sort of tells us everything we need to know about Professor McGonagall. The first time we see McGonagall's emotions sort of betraying the outward appearance that she gives off is when she dabs her eyes after hearing about the Potters. And I think that there is like a striking lack of sadness and mourning for the loss of this very young couple in this chapter, because people are celebrating Voldemort, people are celebrating results, but it hits me that she takes a moment to be mournful. These are students that would have passed through her care. They were only students, 4 to 5 years before this. I think that her acknowledgement of their lives is one of the first insights we get into the fact that she really cares about the young people who pass under her care, and that she immediately sees Harry as a representation of that. She immediately sees Harry as the child of two people who were once children in her care. She doesn't know he's going to be a Gryffindor. She doesn't know what kind of person he'll be, but she immediately wants what's best for him. In this chapter, we see Professor McGonagall being very wary of Dumbledore's seeming naivete. She's like, I've been watching these people, they're the worst sort of muggle. Yet McGonagall trusts Dumbledore, but also seeks what's best for Harry. And that's why it's so hard for her to leave him on this doorstep. Harder than it is for Dumbledore to do so. He sees a bigger picture. She sees a child who will undergo horrible trauma and abuse at the hands of people that she has, watched all day and seen who they are. Think of the ways that this will play out throughout the books. McGonagall is continuously not given all of the information by both Dumbledore and Harry, and yet she continues to safeguard Harry from dangers when others won't. I think it would be easy to misread McGonagall as being all about order, all about rules. And I think that throughout the books, we're going to see that care for kids, even if it's a tough love, even if it's a stern love, overtakes her desire for order. We'll see her fight back against Umbridge, who's the ultimate paragon of order. She will instead fight on behalf of the kids and her colleagues. So McGonagall is extremely brave. She knows when to break the rules. And I think that is a lesson that we can take into our own lives. That there is a time for order, there is a desire for peace, but caring for others does not always mean doing what ruffles the least feathers. It means doing what is best for them. And McGonagall bridges that gap so well throughout these books, and I think we start to see that tendency in her from the very first time we see her. She is ultimately sort of breaking a rule by showing up in this Muggle neighborhood. She is not being very subtle. She's staring back at Muggles. She is doing what she shouldn't be doing. She's out in the open as her animagus, basically stalking these Muggles to see what they're about and why Dumbledore might be coming here. She didn't do this on his authority. She did this on her own because she cares about what's about to happen and she cares about people. So what does this tell us about the Harry Potter story? I think that throughout the books, we see a lot of people step into the role of caretaker. Some of them that are not introduced in this chapter, like Molly Weasley and Remus Lupin, who show love in a variety of ways. Professor McGonagall often doesn't get put in that conversation, but I think if we consider her in the caretaker conversation, we realize yet another way that these books illustrate the power of love. Professor McGonagall will be one of the most steady forces in Harry's life. When he has that dream where he sees himself attack Arthur Weasley, that's who he confides in first, and she believes him. Her stern love, her tough love, her always holding him accountable, holding him to his best potential, holding him to the rules, that comes to bear in a way that she's there at the very end to protect him, and he knows it. We see him finally recognize that he always had this maternal figure in his life. Not just Molly, not just sort of the ghost of Lily and her protection of him and the magic that still comes from that, but that there was a magic in the way that McGonagall, from the very first time she met him, saw somebody who needed protection from those around him who would make him into a pawn or who would make him into an adult before he was ready. She never did that and treated him like the kid that he was and gave him the tough love he wasn't going to get from anyone else. McGonagall and Dumbledore have the same amount of lines in this chapter, and I think that we almost see them in opposition. And it'd be easy to come on the side of Dumbledore, whose plan ultimately plays out. But I think maybe we learn the most from McGonagall and her form of care. She lingers just a bit longer than Dumbledore there at the doorstep, as she will in life. She cannot muster words because finally her emotions are let out, something she doesn't let happen very often. We'll see it again toward the end of the series when she tells Harry, she missed him. And before she turns back into her cat form and slinks into the darkness in this chapter, that is our glimpse of McGonagall's heart. Tough, but protective of this boy, the boy who lived. And thanks to McGonagall's tough love, until the very end, the boy who survived.